Every trader reaches a point where they stop blaming the market. They stop blaming their broker, their strategy, their entry timing, and they sit there quietly and ask themselves one honest question. Why am I still not consistent after everything I have learned? That question is heavier than it sounds, because by the time most traders are asking it, they already know their setup. They already understand support and resistance. They know about risk management. They have watched hundreds of hours of content, read books, studied charts until their eyes went blurry. And still, something keeps breaking down. Not their knowledge. Something else. Something they cannot quite name. Here is what nobody tells you early enough. The gap between knowing how to trade and actually trading well is not filled with more information. It is filled with something far less talked about and far more important. It is your mental and emotional state every single time you sit down at that screen. And if that state is compromised, it does not matter how clean your setup looks. Your execution will crack. This is not motivational talk. This is mechanics. And by the time you finish watching this, you are going to understand exactly why your mental state is not just a soft factor in trading. It is one of the hardest edges you can develop, and most traders ignore it completely. So let us start at the place most traders never look. You wake up in the morning. Maybe you had a rough night. Maybe there is something at home that is stressing you out, a bill you are worried about, an argument you had, a decision you are carrying around. You sit down to trade. You open your charts. The setup looks decent, and you tell yourself, I am a professional. I can separate my emotions from my work. That is one of the most expensive lies in trading. Here is why. Your brain does not have a switch that turns off life stress the moment you open a chart. The human brain processes everything together. The anxiety from your personal life does not stay neatly in one box, while your analytical thinking operates cleanly in another. It bleeds. It always bleeds. Neuroscience has been studying this for decades. When you are under stress, your brain shifts resources. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part responsible for rational thinking, planning, and impulse control, starts to lose its grip. Meanwhile, the amygdala, which is the emotional threat detection center of your brain, becomes more active. It is scanning for danger. And in trading, danger looks like a red candle moving against your position. So what happens? A loss that would normally register as manageable now feels threatening. Your body responds as if something is actually wrong. Your heart rate goes up slightly. You feel urgency. And urgency in trading is almost always a mistake. You either exit a trade too early because the discomfort becomes unbearable, or you stay in too long because you cannot accept being wrong right now. Not today, not with everything else you are already carrying. You move your stop loss. You revenge trade. You take a setup that does not actually meet your criteria because you need to recover something. And afterward, you sit back and wonder why you did that. Because in a calmer state, you never would have. This is not weakness. This is biology. But understanding it is the first step to working with it instead of being destroyed by it. Now, here is something even more specific that traders do not talk about enough. It is the idea of cognitive bandwidth. Think of your mental energy like data in a phone. You only have a certain amount available at any given time. When you are rested, calm, and focused, you have full bars. Every decision you make draws from that reserve. And the more complex the decision, the more it drains you. Trading is extremely cognitively demanding. Every time you analyze a chart, evaluate a setup, weigh your risk, manage an open position, and decide whether to act or wait, you are spending from that reserve. Professional traders know this. That is why many of them trade only during specific hours of the day. Not just because those hours have the best liquidity, but because they have learned that their best decisions happen when their mental energy is highest. Now take a trader who comes to the screen already drained. Maybe they were up late the night before. Maybe they spent the morning dealing with something stressful. Maybe they have been trading for 5 hours straight and their focus started degrading 2 hours ago, but they are still there, grinding. Every decision that person makes is coming from an increasingly depleted resource. And here is the cruel part. You do not always feel depleted. Sometimes you feel fine. Sometimes you even feel wired, almost overconfident. But the quality of your thinking is still compromised. Your risk evaluation gets distorted without you realizing it. A setup that should look borderline starts to look acceptable. A position size that should look too large feels fine. And the warning signals that your process is normally very good at catching just get filtered out. This is why experienced traders talk about mental state as a market condition, not the condition of the market outside, the condition of the market inside. And just like you would not trade the same way in a choppy, directionless market as you would in a clean, trending market, you should not trade the same way when your internal state is choppy as when it is clear. Let us go a layer deeper, because there is something specific that happens to traders under emotional load that most people have never had explained to them clearly. clearly. When you are emotionally activated, your perception of risk changes. Not just your tolerance for risk, your actual perception of it. A small loss feels bigger. A floating drawdown feels more threatening. The uncertainty of a trade that is simply moving normally, doing nothing wrong, starts to feel unbearable in a way it never does when you are calm. And this distorted perception then drives distorted action. You manage a perfectly good trade badly. You cut winners short because the floating profit suddenly feels fragile and you need to lock it in before it disappears. You hold losers too long because your ego cannot process being wrong in this particular session, on this particular day, when everything else is already hard. And then you look at the chart after the session and everything is obvious. You can see exactly where you should have held. You can see exactly where you should have exited. The logic is clear as day. But in the moment, you were not operating on logic. You were operating on emotional state disguised as reasoning. Traders call this analysis. But it is not analysis. It is rationalization. Your emotional brain has already decided what it wants to do, and then your thinking brain constructs a story to justify it. This happens faster than conscious thought, and it is one of the most dangerous cycles in trading because it feels like you are thinking clearly when you are not. So what does this actually look like in practice? Let us walk through a real scenario. A trader has had a bad week. 3 losing trades in a row, all within their risk parameters. Nothing unusual, just a normal losing streak. But emotionally, the weight of those losses is building. They come into Friday wanting to make something back. Not revenge trading in the obvious sense, where they are furious and slamming buttons. Just a quiet, uncomfortable hunger to end the week positive, to have something to show for it. They find a setup that is about 60 or 70% of what they normally require. Not a full signal, a partial one. In a different mental state, they would scroll past it without a second thought. But today, the pull to take it is stronger, and the internal justification sounds completely reasonable. Sometimes you have to be aggressive. The market does not always give you perfect setups. Maybe this is good enough. So they take it. And one of two things happens. Either it works, which reinforces a bad habit and makes the next bad decision more likely, or it fails, which adds another loss to the week and deepens the emotional hole they are already in. Neither outcome actually solves the real problem, because the real problem was never the trade. The real problem was the state they were in when they decided to take it. This is what separates traders who survive long enough to become consistently profitable from traders who cycle through the same mistakes for years. The ones who make it are not necessarily smarter. They are not always more technically skilled, but they have developed an unusual ability to recognize when their internal state is not fit for trading, and they have the discipline to step away when that happens. That last part is the hardest, because stepping away feels like giving up. It feels like weakness. It feels like you are letting the market win. But here is what you need to understand. Capital is not just the money in your account. Mental energy is capital too. And when you protect it, you are protecting your ability to trade well tomorrow and next week and 6 months from now. The trader who sits down every single day regardless of internal state and forces trades through fatigue, stress, and emotional noise is not being disciplined. They are grinding down something they cannot easily replace. And eventually it shows up in the performance data. More erratic trades, wider variance, more impulsive decisions, more frustration, a growing disconnect between their knowledge and their results. Meanwhile, the trader who has learned to treat their mental state as a legitimate variable in their process starts to notice something interesting. On the days they feel clear and rested and focused, their execution improves. Not because the market is different, because they are. They take setups they should take. They skip setups they should skip. They manage open trades with more patience, because the discomfort of uncertainty is not amplified by underlying stress. The results start to compound, not because of a new strategy, because of a consistently better internal environment for executing the strategy they already have. Now let us talk about what this actually looks like as a practice, because knowing this intellectually is not enough. You have to build something around it. The first thing is assessment. Before every session, you need to know where you are mentally and emotionally. This does not need to be complicated. You are not conducting therapy on yourself. You just need an honest answer to a simple question. Am I in a good state to make clear decisions right now? Some traders journal this. They write down how they slept, what their energy level is, whether anything is weighing on them emotionally, and what their mindset heading into the session looks like. Over time, this data becomes enormously valuable because you start to see patterns. You start to see that your worst trading consistently happens on certain types of days. And once you can see the pattern, you can make rules around it. Other traders use a simpler rating system. They give themselves a score from 1 to 10 before each session. Anything above a 7 and they trade normally. Anything between 5 and 7 and they reduce position size. size. Anything below 5, and they either do not trade, or they set very strict rules around how many trades they can take and at what size. The exact system matters less than having one. What matters is that you stop walking into sessions completely unaware of the state you are in, and letting that unexamined state drive decisions worth real money. The second thing is conditions. Just as the market has conditions that are favorable or unfavorable for your strategy, your mental state has conditions that are favorable or unfavorable for good execution. And you need to be honest about what yours are. Some traders know they need a certain amount of sleep to function well. They know that trading after less than 6 hours is consistently bad for them. So they make that a rule, not a preference, a rule. Others know that if they are in a difficult personal situation, trading is not the answer to anything. It will not distract them in the way they hope. It will just give their anxiety a new and more expensive arena to operate in. The more honest you become about your own conditions, the more control you have over your process. The third thing is something almost nobody talks about in trading education, and that is recovery. If you have had a bad session, a rough week, or a period of high personal stress, your mental capital needs to be replenished before you come back. Physically, you would not run on a sprained ankle. Mentally, most traders push through anyway, and then wonder why the damage keeps compounding. Recovery looks different for different people. Some traders take a day completely off the screen after a losing streak, not to analyze, not to watch videos, not to think about markets at all, just to let their nervous system reset. Others exercise, spend time in nature, sleep more, or deliberately engage in something unrelated to trading that gives them genuine pleasure. The point is that you are actively refilling the reserve, not just waiting until tomorrow and hoping you feel better. And here is something that experienced traders understand that newer traders do not. The best trades of your career will not happen when you are grinding through stress. They will happen when you are clear, patient, and operating from a place of genuine steadiness. You cannot force that state, but you can create the conditions for it. There is also a longer pattern worth naming. A lot of traders are trading with financial pressure that is completely at odds with their ability to trade well. They need the money, or they feel like they need to prove something, or they have told themselves a story about what their account should look like by a certain date. And that pressure does not stay outside the trading session. It gets in the room with you. It sits next to you at the screen, and it subtly distorts every decision you make. The trader who is trading scared money, money they cannot afford to lose, money they are counting on for a specific outcome, is not operating freely. They are constrained by the emotional weight of that money in a way that consistently leads to poor decisions. They take profits too early because any gain feels too fragile to hold. They move stop losses because a loss right now is literally unacceptable, and over time the performance reflects not their actual skill, but the distortion created by that pressure. This is one of the reasons professional traders talk so much about trading with money you can afford to lose. Not as a cliche, as an actual mechanical advantage. When the emotional weight attached to each trade is reduced, the quality of decision-making improves. You can execute the process without the interference of desperation, and paradoxically, that often leads to more consistent returns. If you are in a position right now where you are trading with money that carries too much emotional weight, the honest answer might not be to trade differently. It might be to step back, build the account more carefully, reduce size dramatically, or find a way to reduce the pressure on that capital before you come back. Because the technical skill is not the problem. The pressure is. And adding more technical knowledge to a pressure environment will not fix it. Now here is a piece of this that most trading psychology content completely skips over. It is the relationship between identity and loss. For a lot of traders, especially those who have invested serious time and energy into learning this, their identity becomes wrapped up in being a trader. And when that happens, every loss is not just a financial event. It is a threat to who they believe they are. It is evidence that maybe they are not as good as they thought. Maybe they were wrong about themselves. And the emotional reaction to loss becomes disproportionate to the financial reality because it is no longer just about the money. This dynamic is extremely common and extremely damaging because when you are protecting your identity through your trades, you will distort your decision-making to avoid being wrong. You will hold losers longer than you should because cutting them means admitting the trade was a mistake. You will avoid taking certain setups because if they fail, it feels like a personal failure. And your whole relationship with the market becomes about proving something instead of simply executing a process. The traders who get past this are the ones who separate their identity from their trade results. They understand that a loss is information. It is not judgment. It does not mean they are bad traders. It means this particular trade did not work, and that is part of the game. Every professional trader in the the world takes losses. The edge is not in avoiding them. The edge is in keeping them small and not letting them contaminate the next decision. When you can genuinely reach that place, not just intellectually accept it, but actually feel it, something shifts. The emotional charge around individual trades decreases. You execute with more precision because you are no longer carrying the weight of what each trade means about you. Getting there takes time, and it often requires honest self-examination that is uncomfortable. But the traders who do the internal work, not just the technical work, are the ones who eventually come out the other side consistent. Let us bring this together. The question you started with was, why am I still not consistent after everything I have learned? And the answer, the real answer, is that consistency does not come from information alone. It comes from the ability to execute reliably across varying conditions. And execution is inseparable from mental state. When your mental state is clear, your process works. When it is compromised by stress, fatigue, emotional weight, financial pressure, or identity threat, your process breaks down in ways that feel mysterious from the inside, but are completely predictable from the outside. Fixing this is not about reading another book on strategy. It is about taking your internal environment as seriously as your external analysis. It is about building the habit of assessing your state before each session, creating rules that protect your capital on days when your mental clarity is low, giving yourself genuine recovery after difficult periods, and slowly, honestly separating your sense of self from the outcome of individual trades. Professional traders are not emotionless machines. That is a myth. They feel the pressure of the market. They feel the discomfort of uncertainty. They take losses, and it does not feel good. But they have built systems and habits around their internal state that allow them to keep executing cleanly even when conditions are difficult. Not perfectly, but consistently enough to make the edge work over time. That is what consistency actually means. Not winning every trade, not avoiding every loss. Executing the same sound process with enough regularity that the edge has room to express itself. And that only happens when the person behind the process is stable enough to let it run. Your mental state is not a side note in your trading journey. It is a core variable. Treat it that way. Protect it the way you protect your capital. Develop awareness around it the way you develop awareness of market structure. And watch what happens to the consistency you have been chasing. Because the market is the same for everyone. What changes is who you are when you show up to it.